Hi and welcome. My name is Marie Basting. I'm an author based in Manchester and I'm delighted to be chairing this discussion on behalf of the wonderful Portico Library. We've got a very exciting panel of industry experts for you today, all based in the North. They're going to tell us a little bit about their own pathways into publishing and share their insights into the publishing world. And given this event is part of the Manchester City of Literature Festival of Libraries, we'll also be chatting about the work they're doing to promote regional diversity in publishing. So let's meet the panel. Liz, would you like to say a hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm Liz Scott. I'm a freelance children's book publicist. I work on PR campaigns and book tours for children's publishers, authors and literacy organisations.
Great, thanks. And Tilda, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, hi. I'm Tilda Johnson. I'm a freelance children's fiction editor, and I do work for publishers, as well as I'm the editorial director of the Golden Egg Academy, which is a company that teaches creative writing and supports writers who are preparing to submit to agents and publishers.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Layfield, Pitch Book Development Director North with Hachette Children's Groups, and I've worked in the wonderful world of pitch books for over 20 years now. In my previous role for Hachette, I was Group Pitch Book Publisher based down in London, and last year I made the move up to Manchester. Hachette made a commitment to open 5 regional offices, one of them being based in Manchester. And so I started a new role as Pitch Book Development Director North. And Brilliant. As you can probably tell, I'm from Lancashire originally.
Fantastic. So we've got a really sort of broad range of publishing experience, all based in the North. And together, based on the background of that, you actually developed Children's Books North. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think I moved up to Manchester in 2017, and I was really keen to kind of connect with people who work in children's books, and find out everything that was going on. And it sort of occurred to me that there was lots going on and lots of people doing things, but in maybe sort of slightly different pockets, and there wasn't kind of a central hub or a central event where everybody met up and connected regularly. So I was sort of asking around about this, and a good friend at Manchester Met said, "Oh, you've got to meet Liz Scott. She's a brilliant publicist, up near you. You guys would really hit it off." So Liz and I met up and had a coffee and said, "Yeah, we just really need to get everyone in one room together, don't we? Just to get them schmoozing and make those connections." And then when I saw that Emma was moving up and the new Hachette office was opening in Manchester, again, we met up for a coffee, and the 3 of us basically got together and said, let's do it, so that we could, as a way of connecting the writers, the illustrators and the publishing professionals who work across the north of England. So yeah, really our focus is trying to support all of those writers and illustrators and publishing folk, and forge connections between them as well.
So great. So for people who are looking to develop a career in publishing, there's all these new exciting things sort of happening, and I guess with Children's Book North you're kind of starting to create those sort of channels and avenues into publishing there as well. So it's brilliant. So that's a little bit about kind of where you are now. Let's talk a little bit about your own publishing journeys, and what attracted you to a career in publishing and how your publishing journey began. So Liz, would you like to go first with
that? Yes, I can do. So I guess my initial reason for wanting to work in publishing is pretty standard. I think I love books. I've always loved books for as long as I can remember. So I started out in the book industry working at Bradford Waterstones. So after doing an English literature degree, I've actually been trying to think ahead of this event, what was it that made me realise that working in a bookshop would be a good route into a career in publishing? Because even though it seems quite obvious, I'm not necessarily sure that it's something that I would have thought of myself, if I'm being honest. But I can't remember where I got the information from, but it really was a fantastic year working with like-minded people, seeing publisher sales reps, going to publisher road shows, and was just really hugely useful in getting an insight into the industry, and also really being able to demonstrate on my CV that I had a genuine love of books and sort of desire to work in the book industry. So I worked there for a year, and then at the time there really weren't very many publishing options outside of London. So I transferred to High Street Kensington Waterstones, moved to London, worked there for a few months, and then I got my first entry-level publishing position at Phaidon Press as a sales and marketing department assistant, and was there for a couple of years. Then I moved to Usborne, which is where I really discovered that children's books were the place that I wanted to be and was sort of my real home. So I developed my children's book career at Usborne, and then after 10 years in London, I moved to Manchester, moved into freelance, really sort of leveraging all of the contacts that I've made over the last 10 years. And that's where I am now, freelancing. Still do quite a bit of work for Usborne Publishing and work for various other children's publishers, but still freelancing in Manchester.
Brilliant. And you do see that journey quite often, don't you, with publishing professionals kind of doing the due in the city in London, doing the time, and then going into the freelancing side. Was that how it happened for you, Tilda, as well?
Yeah, exactly. So my first job in publishing was with David Fickling Books in Oxford, and I was there for 4 years, and then I moved up to the big Random House office in London. And again, I was a bit hesitant to move to London, but I sort of knew I had to pay my dues, like you said, and it's because it's where so much of the publishing industry is. It's invaluable experience. And then from Random House, I moved to a different publisher, Hachette and Piccadilly Press. But yeah, again, I got to the point where I realised I wanted to not be in London forever, and freelance really was kind of the only real opportunity. But in terms of being attracted to a career in publishing, yeah, I just never stopped reading kids' books, and I did study English Lit and Language at uni, but I was quite often going back and reading Philip Pullman's and reading all my favourite kids' books instead of doing my course texts or as a break from my course texts. And I was really lucky that I had a family friend who works in children's publishing as a reader, and she would always buying us books growing up, and I always had conversations with her about what I was reading, and that never stopped. And it was when I got to the end of uni and she said, have you thought about working in children's books? And to be perfectly honest, I hadn't, just because I hadn't pictured myself working in an office. But once she sort of gave me that nudge, I thought, okay, no, actually that does make sense. I hadn't really considered it was a job that existed, really, even though I knew she sort of vaguely worked in it. And I got my first work experience at David Fickling Books, and then I was just like, okay, yeah, I want to do this. I love this. That was my kind of turning point in.
Yeah. And I think that, again, publishing for me, when I was sort of younger, the idea of working in publishing, it was just something I'd never really have thought about. And I guess that's part of what this panel is about, isn't it? It's showing people that actually it is a career that they can develop as well. So Emma, can I invite you to tell us about what attracted you into publishing and how your career sort of started?
Yeah, sure. So I started with doing A-level English, and initially I actually wanted to be a children's writer. So I went on to do a BA in writing and publishing at Middlesex University. And up until this point, I didn't really realise that, I didn't realise publishing was a career option for me. I'd never heard about it. It was never mentioned at any career talks at school. But it was really the writing side of things that attracted me to the degree. So I moved to London, which was only the second time that I'd ever been to London. And it was during the course that I realised that I love the business side as much as the creative side of things. And that if I worked for a publisher, then it would allow me to do both things. So I actually fell in love with the publishing and business side of things just as much as the creative side. So I went on to do an MA in publishing at Oxford Brookes. And one, because I wanted to learn more about the publishing industry, and two, I just wasn't quite ready to start work. So it was great to delay it by another year. And then when I finished my course, I knew that, in order to work for a mainstream publisher, I had to stay in London. There were opportunities with other children's publishers in Edinburgh and Oxford, but just not as many as in London, and certainly not as many in children's books. And so throughout my university years, I think what had worked well for me is that I'd always worked in bookshops like Liz, and I'd always done work experience at various publishers as well. And I think that work experience, it was really invaluable actually, because it gave me an opportunity to work in lots of different departments, and it allowed me to experience lots of different imprints as well. So I worked in editorial, I did internships in publicity and rights, and it was actually my work experience that landed me my first job as editorial assistant.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm getting this common theme really of trying things out. You weren't maybe quite sure what publishing was about or what a role might look like, but you got in there, tried it out. So brilliant. And my next question was a bit of a cheeky question where I was going to ask you about how old you were when you got your first job in publishing. But I guess by the sound of it, you all went after university, but I'll ask you anyway. So Emma, as soon as you're on the screen, how old were you when you got your first job in publishing?
That was a long time ago. I was 22 when I landed my first role as editorial assistant. I think until then, I was, I never really, even with the work experience, you never really understand what an editorial assistant does until you actually sort of experience it. Things I realised by, what you learning on the job is, I never realised that assistants, often work for more than one manager at a time, and they're working across different lists and imprints. So my first job was editorial assistant for picture books and non-fiction. And actually, it's really great experience at that entry level to work for different managers and to work across different lists as well, because it gives you an opportunity to explore different areas and find out, is it the colour side on the picture books that really interests you? Is it non-fiction? It also gives you, I think, having experience of working for different managers is also really good, because I'm a big believer in mentors. I think a good mentor is really invaluable at your early stage of your career. So I think if you've got a couple of mentors, then that's fantastic. So yeah, you learn a lot as editorial assistant. I think I went in thinking that editors kind of work quietly in the corner with the author, and actually it's far removed from that. You are working as part of a team. You're working as part of a creative team with the author and the illustrator and the editor and the designer, and that's really what attracted me to picture books. I loved that it was such a collaborative experience, and actually not just the creative team. There's obviously a much bigger team, sales, marketing, publicity, etc., working and championing your books as well. So yeah, there's a lot of reading involved, and the days of kind of long lunches are sadly long gone, but there is a great energy and passion in children's books. It's really hard work. It's really fast paced at those entry level roles, and I would probably say my number one tip is just to learn to prioritize tasks. I think that's the first thing you should do as as an assistant. I think if you can nail that, then you'll be in a really good position.
Which I guess is probably true to any sort of busy role, isn't it? It's a generally good tip. And I think it's really good to kind of unpick these roles a little bit as well, because and demystify them, because I think you hear something like editor, and I know I always thought an editor's job was basically, don't tell my editor this, but it was more of a like kind of copy editing, you know, developing the text at that level. And it was only when I got a publishing deal I realized that an editor is actually your partner, and they actually help you shape the book right through from structure, characters. So I think it's actually a much bigger and more interesting role than what people might actually realise. So
absolutely.
So thank you for that. My original question wasn't, it was how old were you when you sort of got your first publishing role? So I'll put that to Tilda next. So
yeah, I was 23, so I'd you know, done uni and then had a year after uni of sort of juggling 3 different jobs and then trying to fit in work experience and apply for all these publishing roles, and then another year after that, so 2 years of doing that actually, and then a year of doing that from Leeds, trying to get more office experience. So yeah,
so it was all about getting that experience then, by the sound of it.
Yeah, and actually, because I hadn't, you know, I didn't have any work experience up until that point. So once I did the work experience and I decided I wanted to get into publishing, I had to try and get office jobs, you know, and you know, so I was working for recruitment agencies and things like that. And I do think getting that confidence and those sort of basic experience working in offices is really helpful, because then you can just be dropped in and you can sort of not be too scared about answering the phone and doing all the admin that you need to do, taking minutes and stuff like that.
Which is kind of similar to what Emma was saying, wasn't it, about learning those basic business skills, prioritization, etc. So
yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, how about you, Liz?
So I was 22 when I started at Bradford Waterstones, and then 23 when I started at Fiden Press. But I just went in totally green. So I didn't know anybody who worked in publishing. I hadn't had any work experience whatsoever. I went straight from the bookshop into being a sales and marketing department assistant. So I don't think I had any sort of preconceived ideas about what I thought a job in publishing was going to be. And I just really learned on the job, which I was quite lucky that I could do, I guess, really, to get a position without having had any experience. It's probably quite rare now. I think it was probably at the time, which was quite a long time ago, it was possibly sort of slightly less competitive getting into publishing. But yeah, so I was a sales and marketing department assistant. Again, as Emma was saying, because it was sales and marketing were the same department, I was working for more than one manager, sort of juggling the tasks of both the sales department and the marketing department. But it was great grounding for really getting a sense of the business and the mechanics of how it worked. So doing obviously really quite basic things like sending out the reps post, but sending out the reps post, you get to nosy through all of the materials for books that are coming up. You really get to understand how the sales cycle works and how they sell into bookshops, see the flip side of what I'd experienced working in the bookshop, and then also working really closely with marketing to support the sales team, really. So it was a great grounding, but yeah, sort of frenetic. It's obviously quite a fast moving department as well, sales. There's a lot of reacting to what's going on as well in the sales department, as well as doing a lot of planning in the marketing department. So it was a great balance and a great grounding, but very much learning on the job and a bit of an eye-opener, to be honest. I had no idea what to expect.
Just jumping in. Well, I think my first job, it was technically office manager, but I was the office manager. I was the PA to the boss, and I was the editorial assistant, you know, and I was doing the post and the milk and, you know, everything. And it was a real juggling act. But actually being in that position, and I think particularly being, because it was a small office, I was kind of the front of house, you know, so dealing with everyone as they arrived for meetings, but also, you know, organizing the boss's diary, you know, you're interacting with everyone that he's meeting with. And it was such a good way of getting to know, I got to know all the authors and illustrators and agents that we worked with really, really well. And actually those, you know, those contacts were kind of invaluable in taking my next step. So although it wasn't, you know, arranging meetings wasn't the most exciting thing, it was, you know, it was really useful.
That's often the beauty, isn't it, of working at a much smaller publisher, is you specialize much later, because you just have to pitch in and do things across all the departments because there are so fewer people there. I think that's quite a benefit sometimes, of just getting a massive overview as to how the whole business works.
Yeah, definitely. And you're involved at loads of different levels, so you might have to run out and get the milk, but then you can sit in on the meeting, you know, with and so it's interesting.
And also, I think for assistants, I think you still get an experience of what it, you know, for say for an assistant editor, you still get an experience of what it is like being an editor. You know, you are, you know, yes, you've got a lot of admin to do. Yes, you are supporting a big team, but at the same time, you are given creative work as well. So, you know, it's a nurturing program and learning, and you are given proofs to check, and you know, you are given paperback cover briefs to do, and so there's a lot of kind of editorial roles within an assistant job as well. So it's not just admin, there is editorial work as well, and that obviously then starts building as you become more experienced. So it is a really you know, great entry level job, because as Tilda said, you just learn so many different things, but you're getting that editorial experience as well. And especially, as I said, if you've got a good mentor, you've got a good boss, or there's an editor you work closely with who you can sort of shadow, and those shadowing the experiences are really important for junior editors as well.
So I think I'm hearing from this, really, it's like, be prepared to roll your sleeves up, get stuck in.
Yeah.
Don't go in there expecting it all to be glamour and these sort of high profile meetings. You might be making the tea or fetching the milk as well. But what that will do is give you this really broad experience. And that's where you can sort of then decide where you want to specialize and work your way up. So
definitely. And I think, you know, taking whatever opportunities you can and not being afraid to ask, I think is really important thing. Once I sort of realized that actually, if you do say to people, I'm interested in this, or can I help you on that, they're always, you know, they're always happy for extra help, you know, and they're always, you know, supportive and willing to give you an opportunity. And so I think that was something that was a real, you know, realization for me, was really helpful.
And there are opportunities as well, you know, especially with the bigger publishers, to move around departments as well. So just because you're an editorial assistant for rights doesn't mean that you can't move into publicity or marketing. So I think those opportunities are there, and it is important, I think, to experiment at that early stage of your career, because you might get an entry-level job in rights, but that doesn't mean you have to stay in rights. If it's not the right fit for you, you can move departments. And I think, you know, again, being part of a bigger publisher, once you kind of got your foot in the door, then you see those opportunities, you're aware of what's becoming available, and you can move departments.
Definitely.
And I think on that then, that kind of being prepared to move around, try things out, be prepared to maybe make some mistakes in the early stages. It mightn't all go to plan. So on that note, because obviously we want people to understand this as you know, a career that's accessible, and that we might not get it right first time. So Tilda, what was the biggest mistake you ever made in publishing, and how did you rectify it?
I mean, I've got a couple of examples. One that immediately springs to mind, which, you know, actually I don't think was fully my fault, but was
That's a great start.
We're not about blame, no.
We're past blame. It was realizing that a book I had sent to print, the author, you know, it all the final changes had been made, it had all been approved, and then I just added in the bits at the beginning, right at the beginning of the book and right at the end, you know, which I just added those on, and then I sent it to the author and said, you know, it's gone to the printers, you know, have a nice weekend, and here's the final document. And he rang up to say, one of my children's names is missing from the dedication at the beginning of the book. Which I don't know how, but I genuinely, I don't think it was our fault, but for whatever reason, you know, he had 3 children and only 2 of them were mentioned in the dedication. You know, and it was sort of 4 p.m. on a Friday, and it all gone off. And to be honest, I got my manager helped me get in touch with the printers, and we literally called up and were like, stop press. I mean, I don't think they'd actually started printing them yet, but we did manage to get in and get the corrected file to them in time. So that was quite a dramatic one. Yeah. But I think in terms of editing, there was someone who I was working with, and it was a writer who their original editor was leaving, so they were being sort of handed over to me with their new book, and the first draft they'd sent in of this new book, the other editor and I had both read it and, you know, gathered our notes, had a bit of a chat, and then we had the meeting with the author together, and sent feedback to her afterwards. And then when the second draft came in, it was just me, and not much had changed in the novel, and I had been hoping that quite a lot would change. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to show her what I mean. So I really rolled my sleeves up, and I made lots of line edits. So basically making changes directly on the text, and the changes were tracked, so you could see where I'd made changes, but sort of cutting things out and rewriting bits and blah, blah, blah. And I'd really gone for it. And, you know, it was very much sort of, you know, they were all suggestions, and it was only kind of an idea to show what I meant. But I think I hadn't really prepared the writer for the fact that I was going to really roll my sleeves up and get it. And I line edited the whole manuscript like this. And I think, you know, she was very polite about it, but I think it was a bit of a shock, and I think it scared her a bit. So, you know, I think I just had to have a really good follow-up conversation with her and really build her confidence and show that I wasn't trying to take control of the story, and I wasn't trying to, you know, sort of take control of it, and that they were all just options and ideas and suggestions. But really I had to then just work at the relationship to build up that trust really hard after that, I think. But we actually had a great working relationship, and you know, we worked on a couple of books together, and but I think communication's important. And you know, I think maybe if I'd done a sample section and said, I'm thinking of this kind of, you know, these are the points, and here's an example of what I mean, can you have a go yourself? Or maybe if I'd warned her that I was gonna send it back with all these red lines all over it.
I don't know if I'm horrified by that, Tilda. The idea of getting that document, I'm coming out in a cold sweat. Not at all. I think it is, though. It is very much about communication, that, isn't it? That's a lesson about communication and about learning the ropes, because if you hadn't handled a situation like that before, you know, you don't necessarily know how to communicate. And I think there is an important lesson for us all, that it's not irrectifiable, that you can sort it out and you will make mistakes. Definitely. And I think as well, with your manager, getting your manager involved, again, that's exactly what you need to be doing at the early stages of your career, isn't it? So not being afraid to make those sort of mistakes. But
definitely. I think on reflection, you know, I should have, when I saw it and didn't think enough has changed, I probably should have rang her agent and said, I was expecting more changes and this is what I think I'm going to do, you know. And I think also because I was up against it with time, I probably hadn't taken enough time to explain all the changes I was suggesting, which is very important.
Sure. That's it. Time is always the enemy, isn't it, in these situations? So, and like I say, expectations. And I mean, that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is for Emma, because as a debut author, I was just like really gobsmacked, I guess, by how many people were actually involved in the production of my book. This was like my little baby, and all of a sudden it was being pulled about by all these different people. So I just wondered, Emma, if you could tell us a little bit more about that process of a book going from that draft that the author produced us to the final stages of publication. What does that process look like?
Yeah, well, it's a big question, so I'll try and keep my answer quite short. And I think if I sort of give a sort of example for picture books, so as I mentioned with picture books are always a creative, you always work as a creative team. It's a 50-50 partnership between the author and the illustrator, and your creative team is the editor and the designer. So it's author, illustrator, editor, designer, and the four of you work together on creating the pitch book. So the editor and designer will work closely with you on the text and the layouts. And as an author, you'll be shown the illustrator's character sketches and roughs and final artwork along the way. So in creating the book, as for picture books, it's the four of you. That is the creative team. The exception is with the cover. Now, covers are always involve a wider team because it's really vital that we get the cover right for the market. So we've got sales and marketing who are also involved in the cover discussions. So that's kind of when it opens up to the wider team. And then, of course, you know, once your book is finalized, then there's so many different departments who are involved in helping to create and promote your book. You've got production who obviously work with the printers to create the proofs, to which are the proofs that sales sell from. You've got our rights team who will then take your book to the book fair to present and to sell. You've got the sales team who are going to then approach retailers to see if they're going to be interested in taking your book. You've got PR who connect the author with media outlets and audiences. You've got marketing who's going to get the word out about your book. So you've got a whole team involved. And if a publisher also has TV, film, stage, merch rights, then you know, you'll have someone, for us it's our head of licensed content, who then go out to sell those rights to your book as well. So it starts off with your creative team. It then expands to a wider team to involve the cover. And then in terms of sales, PR, marketing, it goes to a much wider team. So there are so many different people who are all behind the success of your book and getting your book out there. As an author, it's really your editor who is your main point of contact throughout the whole life of your book. So they will be involved with you right from, you know, before the book is acquired, throughout the life of the book. And it's the editor who shares good news and bad news about your book. They'll share reviews, they'll share award news, they'll share sales information, and they're your kind of go-to person who the editor sits at the heart of every book and knows everything that's going on about the book in terms of PR, marketing, etc. And then as well as that, there's so many other departments who are also involved. You know, you've got contracts, you've got finance. I think publishing is very interesting because I think when people think about publishing, they think about the editor and the designer, but actually there's so many different departments involved in it. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how, you know, of the journey. But I think, yeah, there are a lot of people involved in your book. And I think the thing is, this is why acquisition meetings are so important, because when a book is acquired and it's taken to an acquisition meeting, you've got representatives from all of those departments at that meeting. So you've got, it's not just the editor and the designer there, you've got sales, you've got rights, you've got marketing, you've got publicity. And and they are all buying into the book that they are going to sell. So that acquisition meeting is really, really important to get. It's not, it's not just the editor who's championing your book. You need to get the whole team behind it as well. So once you've got everyone behind it, then they can go forwards and promote and sell your book brilliantly.
And just to explain for anyone who's outside the industry, the acquisition meeting, that is like the really important point, isn't it? Where an editor might have made a decision that they like a book, but then they've got to convince the rest of the team to basically acquire it or purchase it. So it's not just the editor's decision, is it? Which I guess the editor wishes it was sometimes.
I'll tell you what, it's really, as I said, it's really, it's great to know that you are acquiring it as a team, that the whole company is behind it, and it's not just you. Yes, you may love a book, but it's not enough for the editor just to love the book. You need to get everyone else to love the book as well, and that's part of the job of the editor. And that's you champion the book, and you jump up and down and you shouted about it at acquisitions, and you really sell the pants of it.
Because like we have these dreamy kind of pictures of publishing, don't we, which we get from watching rom-coms probably in films.
Where it's exactly like Bridget Jones in publicity.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. We're going to ask you more about that in a minute. You can tell us about sliding down fire pearls or whatever else you've been up to. But yeah, I guess it's a team effort, isn't it? And ultimately, although it might seem like a romantic industry, publishing is a business, and it's about the bottom line, like any other business, isn't it, really? So, but yeah, we may as well bring Liz in, I think, then, to talk a little bit more about what happened. So we've got this book, it's the sales and marketing team are getting out there, but then you're going to be looking also at the sort of PR aspects. How do you, as a freelance sort of publicist, work with an author to enhance what the publishers are doing?
So yeah, as a freelancer, it's slightly different again. So I guess when I was an in-house publicist working in publicity and marketing, then I would be involved in the at the acquisition stage and go to those Emma's acquisition, not Emma's personal acquisition meetings, but the acquisition meetings that Emma was just telling us about. Go along to that, talk about where you see the book sitting within the market, what other comparable titles there are around, how you think you would position it, all of those kind of things. We'd be having those conversations at acquisition stage. Now I'm freelance, and outside of that sort of in-house process, I probably get involved a little bit later. And that really depends on the size of the campaign, the expectations around a particular book. So I could still get involved up to a year before publication, but I'd say the more typical timescale really would be probably about 6 months prior to publication. And that's when I will start working with publishers to agree the messaging and those core markets again, really sort of pin down the shape of the campaign and look at how we're going to reach all of our different targets. One of the things that's quite unique, I think, about children's books is you have to appeal to so many different people other than just the reader. Obviously, the reader is the core person that you're speaking to, but in terms of who's buying the book, that's the trade, it's parents, it's teachers, librarians, grandparents. You know, you're appealing to a wide range of markets. So a lot of campaign planning is taking into account, you know, the slightly different messaging for all of those different markets. And that starts with building trade recognition. So really trying to develop the anticipation and the awareness of a book ahead of publication within the book trade itself is quite core to what I'm doing. So by the time the sales team are presenting the book to bookshops or book chain head offices, you want them to already be sort of anticipating this book and already have heard of it, ideally. So yeah, the sales team, you're then making sure that they're going in with the best possible starting point. They're armed with advanced proof copies, with covers, with you know, all of the marketing materials to give it the best possible chance when they're doing that initial sell into bookshops. And then as you get closer to publication, then that's much more, of course, working with the author, working with their messages and what they think that they want to be speaking about in terms of the book, and really trying to place review coverage and interviews and really building up to that publication moment and beyond. Obviously, like everybody, my job's changed quite a lot in the last sort of a year and a half, just because of the nature of what I was doing. I do a lot of campaign work, but I also do an awful lot of organising of events and schools tours and bookshop tours. So that was quite a big part of my job, which has obviously changed dramatically recently. So there's no going on the road with authors. I used to spend quite a lot of the autumn on the road doing book tours, accompanying authors to schools and various places. So that's all changed, but hopefully we'll be back out there before long.
Do you think publishing will have been changed forever by the pandemic, things like that? Sort of, do you think we'll still see a mixture of like Zoom and face-to-face stuff? Or
I do. I think you can't. Obviously you can't underestimate the value of an author being physically in front of a reader. You know, when I go into schools and you see the effect that an author visiting has on readers, I mean, it's immense. But I do think the amount that we've learned over the past year and a half in terms of the technology, in terms of sort of the receptiveness to online events, has had a huge impact on accessibility and inclusivity. And I think if we can continue with some sort of hybrid where we have in-person events because they're invaluable, but also we have online events, which mean that, you know, we can expand our audience massively, then I think, yeah, I do think it will have changed, but hopefully for the better.
Yeah, let's hope so. And we're going to talk a little bit more about inclusivity. I can't get my words out there a little bit later. But first, there was just one other aspect of publishing that I was hoping Tilda could tell us a little bit about. And that's the role of the literary agent, who plays a massive part in an author's life. I know that. So can you tell us a bit more about how an editor might work with a literary agent?
Yeah, so yeah, literary agents are normally the person who's initially taking on a writer or an illustrator. So they're actively looking for new clients who have, you know, who they're excited about as a person, but also who have book ideas they're excited about. And their role is to then obviously present them and sell them into publishers and support their client, you know, through their career and through publication. And yeah, I think in terms of relationship between agents and editors, I think agents will be very aware of which publishers, what publishers are publishing, what they're interested in, what their taste is, and even particularly which editors, you know, what their taste is and what they're looking for. And so they will keep in quite close contact, agents and editors, you know, sometimes, and there'll be certain people that you might know a bit better or have more history with or hit it off with. But I think the closer those relationships are, then the more selective agents can be when they're submitting. So I know that when I was still working for publishers, and there might be some agents that would just, it felt like they were sending me every single submission they had, and I couldn't keep up because my reading pile was so big, you know, but then there might be other agents who, you know, I would only maybe get one submission a year from them. So when it came in, you know, I knew I was maybe only one of a handful of people getting it, because they were really trying to pair the right publisher and the right editor with their client. And so those were the ones that you really sat up and took notice and you read it as soon as you could. So in terms of the relationship between agents and editors, it's an interesting one, because I think it benefits if you can be close, but then actually really the agent is representing their client and the editor is representing their publisher. So sometimes you do have to sort of stand up to one another a little bit, whether or not it's about a decision, you know, you're making about the book, or if it's about the contract or whatever it is. Does that answer your question?
It does, definitely. And I'm just remembering, it was a while ago now, you and I actually had a conversation about literary agents when I was looking for one, didn't you? And I remember you saying to me that like an agent's role for the author is really kind of a problem solver as well. And so like if you've got a problem with your editor or with the book and things aren't working out well, the literary agent, I guess, provides a buffer between you and the editor and can help you sort things out. So for me, they've got this problem solving role as well, really.
Yeah.
Sometimes they feel a bit like your mum as well, kind of holding your hand through the hard times. So it's quite a big role, isn't it, really? And an interesting career to develop. So
yeah, and also, you know, the agent is helping their client think about when their money's coming in and all of that sort of financial side of things as well, I think, a bit, as well as, like you say, I think with the creative process, you do want to keep the relationship between the editor and the writer really, really good and positive. And actually, so if, you know, the creative is unhappy about something, it can be helpful if the agent is the one that sort of comes and complains about it to the publisher or to the editor, because then the editor and the writer can kind of keep their relationship happy and comfortable and relaxed and close and creative, you know.
And we're hearing again and again, aren't we, about how publishing is all about relationships. Sorry, Emma, did you want to say something there?
Oh, I was just going to say, you're right, it is all about relationships. I was just going to say, as Tilda's point, that relationship between the author and the agent is about finding the right agent. It's about finding the right fit for you as well. So it's not about only just finding where your book's going to sit, which publisher is best to publish it, but it's initially finding the right agent to represent you, and that takes time, and that is about relationships, and it's about finding the right fit for you. Someone who you trust, someone who you can speak openly with. That's the starting point of your career, is finding the right agent.
Yeah, I would agree definitely with that. I've just noticed the time. I'm horrified. We've not got much time left, have we? And we're not even halfway through our questions, really. So maybe I'll sort of try and sort of stick with some of the more sort of the areas we haven't really covered yet, because I think some of the later questions we've sort of touched on. But one thing we've not really got into is this issue about inclusivity in publishing. And I know publishing is a profession that it's been criticised for being a profession for the privileged. So it's been said that it's only people who can afford to live in London, who are in the know and can get internships, who've got parents who can support them, who can really get into publishing. Emma, do you think that's a fair criticism?
I think it's absolutely essential that publishers burst outside of the London bubble. They have to make publishing more accessible and inclusive to everyone. And I think there are concrete steps that are being made in the right direction. And I think certainly from Hachette point of view, you know, as I mentioned, you know, Hachette's opening up 5 regional offices, one of them being in Manchester. And, you know, they are being set up in order to allow us to diversify the workforce. Because I think that's what it boils down to. If your workforce is not diverse, then your books, the content that you're publishing, is not going to be diverse. So it's really important that we have a diverse workforce. So I certainly know that with the Hachette's regional offices, you know, we've already started to recruit locally. And once the offices are open, which we're hoping that all 5 of them are going to be open this summer, then staff will also be involved in careers outreach programs in the cities and the wider regions. There's obviously other initiatives such as remote work, paid work experience, which has come about really because of the pandemic. And I think I think that remote work experience, such as the ones that Orion run, I think are absolutely invaluable, and I think they'll continue. So I think everyone should be looking out for those opportunities. So I think, yeah, we have to the industry has to burst outside the London bubble, and there are steps being made, but we've just got to keep driving forwards on that front.
Real. So, I mean, we talked earlier about publishing being more competitive. I think Liz mentioned that, but at the same time, for people living in the north, who are our audience today, it could actually be a really good time because they might not necessarily have to make that migration down to London.
That's right. I mean, we've just one of Hachette's new trainees. We've got 10 new trainees joining us this year, and one of them is from the north, and he's going to be based at the Manchester office when it opens. So those opportunities are now really starting to open up. Obviously, the pandemic slowed down our office openings last year, but I think, you know, once we get into the offices, then more opportunities are going to open up. And you know, I think it's essential that that the industry invests in more mentor schemes as well, for aspiring publishing professionals who are outside of London, to show them that they don't have to move to London to work in publishing. I'm a mentor for Society Young Publishers and UCLan University, and obviously Children's Books North. We've launched our own mentor scheme this year as well, because it is so important that we retain the talent in the regions, and that everyone doesn't head off to London. So I think those mentor schemes are really important, and I think setting up initiatives to find new talent in the north as well, they're really important. We just announced today our Picture Book Open Days, which are to discover unpublished writers and illustrators who are based in the north. I think it's initiatives like that that are leading to results. You know, we've signed up a couple of illustrators from Yorkshire from last year. We hope to be able to sign up more this year. So I think yeah, it's about bursting outside the London bubble. It's about setting up regional offices. It's about offering mentor schemes for publishing professionals based here, and it's about setting up initiatives as well to really support and discover new writers and illustrators.
Brilliant. So it's like a holistic approach, really, isn't it? That's
absolutely
needed.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talked a little bit about mentoring, and that's kind of, I wanted to ask Liz a little bit more about sort of how we make underrepresented people feel more involved and that they actually belong in publishing. And I guess mentoring is one of those sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Echoing everything really that Emma's just said about sort of nurturing that talent that is there, but has sort of traditionally perhaps not seen a path into publishing. And I think in addition to mentoring and paid internships and other schemes like that, I think transparency is hugely important. So, you know, just everything from including salary details on job adverts to making more information available about what jobs actually exist within a publishing company. You know, as we were talking about at the start, there are so many different roles. I had no idea. I found out so much in my first job in publishing just from being on the same floor as foreign rights. I didn't know that foreign rights existed. I didn't have a clue what they did. You know, just I think like any industry really, we can be quite guilty of assuming a certain level of knowledge, which then makes publishing quite opaque and makes it seem very much like a closed shop. And I think just opening out information, sharing information, being much more transparent about about what's available within the industry can only help with sort of welcoming underrepresented communities and helping them see what roles may be available.
Yeah, definitely. So it comes back to that kind of criticism of it being a closed shop. You've got to be in the know. You've got to have someone who's already in the industries to explain how to get into it, really. So transparency, absolutely key. Tilda, did you have any thoughts on that, or any sort of general tips on improving young people's chances of getting into publishing?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about work experiences, and we've all talked about having got into publishing, having studied at uni, but I think actually, publishers are widening their gaze in terms of, they know that they need to diversify their workforce. They know that they need to draw people from different backgrounds and different life experiences. And I think, they're not so focused on making everybody jump over the same hurdles as they once were. And I think, in terms of sort of in a job application or in an interview, or even just on your social media profile that maybe you're using to kind of talk about books and pursue your publishing career, I think showing that the children's market, or showing that the publishing market that you're interested in, is so important, and showing that you have opinions on it. You have opinions on what's being published, and that you're involved and interested, because I think, people will as soon as people see that, they'll see that you have what it takes, and you have those interests driving you. Like I said earlier, the sort of admin office experience is really helpful, because it means you can just be dropped in and you can hit the ground running to a certain extent. So I think if you can get that, fantastic, that's helpful. But I think, any sort of connection, especially as things are kind of more online, any kind of networking or just connecting, whether or not it's just going to festival events, literary festival events, or book events, book launches, anything that you can be involved in. And if you get a chance to meet anyone, say, I'm really interested in publishing, can you give me any advice? And trying to sort of make connections any way you can. But just in terms of kind of getting to know the market, and then however you can sort of share that. I've seen book bloggers who have been hired as agents and who have been hired as editors, and I think from their online profiles, it was really clear that they knew the market, and that was, publishers recognized how valuable that was. So it doesn't, you don't need to kind of necessarily go a certain route, and I think things are definitely loosening up in that sense, if you guys agree.
Absolutely. And I think, completely agree with all of that. I think the only thing I would add is that I think with publishers, that they're looking for candidates who have got different perspectives. They're from different backgrounds, they've got different points of view. I think, no publisher wants a team all with the same vision. So I think, when you're sending in your CV or you've got an interview, just don't be afraid to be you, stand out, be yourself. No one wants a team that's all the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. With our mentorship schemes, we had a lot of applications, and it was really hard choosing who to work with, wasn't it? And it was the people who jumped out as having a particular story or a really particular interest that we ended up choosing, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I
think
I'd
sorry, Liz, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in terms, just to add to that as well, in terms of top tips, I was going to slightly cheat and pinch somebody else's advice, because I saw, Marie, when you put out a shout out on Twitter about things ahead of this, about things that people wish that they'd known. There was a comment on there from somebody, I can't remember who it was, I'm really sorry. Somebody saying, really take the time to find out what kind of publisher you want to work at, which really struck me, actually, because it wasn't something that I'd necessarily thought about before. But the vast majority of publishers that I've worked for and still work for are small independent publishers. And I don't think that that's necessarily been a conscious decision, but I think that they're sort of more the places that I gravitate towards and that probably really suit me. So I don't know, in terms of tips, I'd say maybe instead of a sort of scattergun approach of applying to as many jobs as you possibly can, maybe take the time to really think about what's important to you, and really sort of look at publishers, really take the time to find out about publishers, and perhaps apply to fewer roles, but really take the time to, you know, to really look at the kinds of things that those publishers are publishing and the kind of ethos that they have, and if that really fits with you.
I think that's really good advice, definitely, because yeah, each business is going to be very different in its ethos and outlook, and yeah, I mean that sort of I think what was really reassuring listening to some of that is that it sounds to me like things are changing, that there are more opportunities for people to get into publishing who mightn't have necessarily thought about a career before. And I was also kind of interested in what Tilda was saying about alternative routes into publishing. So bloggers being picked up to do agent roles. So I guess it's this idea of keeping an open mind, really, isn't it? Doing your research, thinking things through, and really asking yourself, what do you want out of a career in publishing? Because it really can offer a broad spectrum of careers. So that's what I'm getting from all of this. Just any final words that you want to add, any final tips, or just any thoughts on how publishing is changing and becoming more representative? And Emma is on my screen, so I'll ask Emma first. So
I think in terms of the tips, I think there are, I think you've got to look out for the demystifying publishing events that are going on. I think they are, again, a lot of these have happened during the pandemic, but they're going to continue. I know Hachette's going to be running a series of free online panel events called Opening the Book, which basically will just give you a flavour of the different roles in publishing, and just give you a really honest view of career progression as well. I think they're going to be vital. I think that they're going to be online, they're going to be free, they're going to be easily accessible to everybody, and it just really does open up the publishing industry. So that you just find out a bit more about it and just get an idea, of what area might suit you, what publisher might suit you. There's various publishers who are doing these events, and I think just sign up for them, go along to them. Also, it's really good to have that on your CV as well. It just shows that you're really proactive, you've gone out there, you've engaged, gives you opportunities to network. There's people who you'll hear talk at these events who you could follow up directly with on LinkedIn or Twitter, and just start making those connections. So I think it's a really good opportunity. That opportunity wasn't there when I first started out in publishing, and I would have loved to have had that opportunity where you get a little bit of an insight into the business before you actually start.
Lovely, thanks, Emma. Tilda or Liz, have you got any final thoughts?
I was just going to say, don't worry too much about being everywhere. And as I was just saying, use the networks that are available. There are so many brilliant networks like Young Publishers, Portico. Really take the time to find out about these places, but don't worry. If, for example, LinkedIn isn't for you, LinkedIn scares the bejesus out of me. If it's not for you, find a platform that is for you, and just be positive, be generous, support other people on their journey. There seems to be quite a community of young people who are on that journey to get into publishing, and are sharing experiences on social media, and it feels like it's a really sort of positive, supportive place. So really sort of get in amongst those and really use those networks to support yourself and others on that route into publishing.
Brilliant. And and it's about finding your tribe, isn't it? And I think that's the feeling that I think we've all had when we had that first experience in publishing, was that we found our tribe with children's books. We were with the like-minded people who were already passionate. And I think I'm just going to slightly repeat some of the things I said before, but just, being really proactive, making the most of your opportunities, or when you do make contact with someone, and just asking, and also just, keep up with the market, which whatever area of publishing, or however widely it is, that, just keep reading and keep up to date that way. And, maybe make the most of being able to then if you read something that you love, you know, connect with that person on social media or online, sign up to their newsletter and keep up to date with them, you know, and interact with them, because it's so easy to do that now. And I think that can be a really, really useful and really useful stuff.
So make the most of the opportunities that are out there, I guess. That's one of our key messages. Be positive, communicate, network and support others. I think that's a great way to sort of finish, really. Thank you so much for sharing your publishing insights. That was a really fantastic, broad overview of the publishing industry. And I'm sure people will get so much out of it. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to the Portico Library as well, who've made this event possible. And if you've never visited the Portico, do go and take a look. It's got a fantastic collection of rare books. They do lots of events like this. They run the Sadie Massey Awards, which is an award for young writers, which I'm involved in. So if you're interested in publishing more from the writer's point of view, the Portico's got lots to offer there. So do check them out. And whatever pathway into publishing you choose, good luck and thank you for coming along. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
so much for having us,
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.